I was just in the kindergarten class while I was filling up my coffee
Were you?
after a few seconds, seeing the 5-year-old with
I
her.
peeked in on my daughter too. She was doing some sort of an activity. I do feel like kids are a lot more resilient than we give them credit though. So
They're doing amazing. Yeah, they're doing amazing.
the first few days had a couple tears, but I think it's just going to get easier.
Cool. Well, we'll kick off. Welcome, everybody. Jim Benton, CEO of Chorus, here for the weekly briefing. This is our weekly update where we share the insights behind the conversations. And today I'm joined by Stephanie Benavidez. Stephanie is the Senior Director of Sales Enablement at WellRight. Stephanie, great to see you today. How are you?
Great to see you as well, Jim. Thanks for having me today. I'm doing well on this beautiful, is it Thursday today?
Beautiful Thursday. And are you in Chicago? Is that about right?
I'm right outside Chicago near O'Hare Airport, yeah.
Gotcha. I know we were talking briefly about this distance learning. Maybe just before we get into the data, as we're all kicking off school right now, how are you holding up in this environment with the kids doing the remote learning?
It's a lot easier now that I have actually waved my white flag and asked for some help. And I think all of us need to do that a little bit more now if you have the ability to. So we did bring on some help this week and going forward for the next year for both of my daughters, both e-learning from home this year. The spring was an interesting learning lesson, and as a mom of two, working full time, growing and scaling a startup, I can't do it all by myself. So I definitely, like I said, waved the white flag and said, someone help me.
Well, I think it ties into our conversation today about just well-being and doing more with less. And I think that we're seeing this in September. I've got 3 little kids, and as I was mentioning right before the show, I feel like I was in kindergarten in our kitchen, in the 3rd grade in the living room, and in 4th grade in the other room.
Yeah.
So it is. I think we're going to see some real stretch of a lot of people right now, and it's
absolutely. There's people are being pulled in multiple directions, and but knowing that others are in the same situation is a little comforting, right? That we're all experiencing this together.
We will look back when this is all done. A year from now, we'll probably look back in a blink of an eye and miss sort of those moments where you could be with the kids 2 minutes before recording and meeting with you. But I appreciate you joining us today. I'd love to, just before we jump in, can you share, Stephanie, a little bit about, from an enablement standpoint, how you structure the org, what the sales team at WellRight looks like?
Sure. So, WellRight is about 7, almost 8 years old now. We're in our, I call it 3rd year of selling, going into our 3rd year of selling. And the first 4 years were really focused on product development and making sure that we had a really solid product. The last 3 years have been creating and building a sales team built on consistency, a playbook that didn't exist before, and teams that had niche functions. It was kind of off of like that predictable revenue model. So having niche functions within my team, I oversee a couple different areas. So I have BDRs, proposal writers, sales enablement specialists, sales training. So a couple different functions. My title may or not really understand what I actually do. But all to say is that these niche functions are important in helping to provide sales readiness, and whether it's on the front end of prospecting, during RFPs, during that technical discussion when you're implementing and scoping things out. So during this time, I think we've had to get really gritty, doing more with less. I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit later as well. How do we really make full use of the people that we do have on our team, and do it smarter, not harder? So those are a couple of the things that we've really tried to be creative during this time.
Well, I think that the creativity we're seeing across the board, and one of the areas that we were looking at this morning was just overall productivity across teams. We always look at this, and what we find is that Q3 is down about 6% versus Q2. So this is overall customer-facing meetings that we're seeing across the platform. And Q2 is down a little bit from Q1. And so curious about, as you look at your team and just how, in the spirit of well-being, how are we holding up from a productivity standpoint over the last few months?
I would say, some of the things that we've heard that just in passing discussions, it feels like Groundhog Day, that people every day is kind of the same day because you're not going to an office. In terms of measuring KPIs and productivity, this has been something very near and dear to my heart with the sales management team, understanding where people are spending their time. I will say that WellRight has been pretty fortunate that we actually have been pretty busy during this time. We are a health and wellness technology platform that helps to provide healthy habits, activities and challenges and content and learning labs around your health. And so I think a lot of companies have realized how important this is during this time. And so we have actually seen an increase in our meeting volume, only given, I think, what we do provide to the market.
It's interesting, by the way, Stephanie, you're mentioning about how you're seeing good times here. I think that's been such a consistent theme and sometimes a surprise as we talk to folks where you'd think that different businesses are being impacted and yet we're consistently seeing people make changes and seeing, some strong performances at the end of Q2 and in Q3. The one area that we wanted to dig into with you today was looking at the aspect of burnout a little bit. And I think from both an enablement standpoint and just being in the well-being space, what we've been looking at is overall conversations. There's been an increase in burnout mentions. It's up 26% since the end of Q1. And March was actually quite higher than even February. So this is real. And I'm curious your thoughts on just the concept of burnout right now and what we can be doing to help our teams get through it.
I think this is such a widely discussed topic. I don't think people have really talked about mental well-being and health more now than ever. I think people are feeling stretched very thin, and they are trying to, I think, overcompensate a little bit because they start their days maybe at 5 a.m. and end their evenings at 11 p.m. I've had those conversations, myself included, with team members. And I think, I'm not unique in that situation. I think there are a lot of people out there that feel like I've got to do more. I'm at home. I've got to focus, heads down. I think making time for yourself is very important. Carving out, the self-care piece, whether it's going for a bike ride, getting in a workout, going for a walk. Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and sitting on back-to-back meetings is tough, not just for our kids who are e-learning, but even for you and I. It's tough to stay engaged. WellRight, actually, we've put out a lot of content and a lot of information out there about mental well-being during this time. So if you haven't checked out our LinkedIn, go check it out. On resources, how you can make yourself a number one priority right now. Everyone gets one life, one body to take care of, and your mental health is just as important. So blocking out time on your calendar for those different activities is more important than ever.
Yeah, I feel like we're mixing the special places where we typically relax or operate in a different way with our families. It's getting mixed together. I was with a friend last week that was talking about a getaway place where him and his family would be, but now that he's working there, it's changed that experience to not be as special. And so how do we protect these areas that we used to use as a recharge and not let them become just a blend of everything? And I'm curious, Stephanie, how do we, from the fun aspect, when we look at this burnout aspect, how do we keep the fun in work? And what are some of the things that you've been seeing out there that are helping teams to keep that human connection and really just to keep it interesting right now?
Prior to joining this call with you, Jim, we were meeting with our extended management team on how do we continue to build our culture and keep that, fun and engaging and productive too, right? But also having fun at work, because there's no ping pong table anymore. There's no happy hours in the office and clinking beers together. Our sales team has a weekly virtual happy hour that we do. We've played games on there. We've done trivia. We've brought our high school photos and guessed who is who. And, you know, I'm thankful you guys actually invited us to a wine tasting event that we actually copied the idea and used for our own sales team in our inviting prospects to that. So that we're trying to have fun while working, you know, like you said, we're blending the two these days, and who doesn't like wine and, you know, learning a little bit more about that all while cheering virtually.
It sure helps, right? It sure helps to get people, loosened up. I've been so surprised with those virtual events when you're right, when you invest into it differently and make it creative, to be able to bring people together from literally across the planet. You know, you're just dealing with time zones into these breakouts. It's a very special experience. Yet we're converting bedrooms and dining rooms into bars at night. But
this is true. Yes.
It's funny when the family sees you walk away with the bottles of wine and say, "Now we're switching into happy hour." It is important to keep the fun in work. One of the other aspects of the data we were looking at this week was specifically looking at the trend over the last few months of how we're hearing our customers, basically the buyers, people in the pipeline, their mentions of RIFs and layoffs. It's been a real topic. I think now we're seeing things settle down, but in April, May, it was impacting pipelines. A lot of the buyers were saying, look, we can't buy. And this is the mentions that we were picking up from the calls was they were having RIFs. It's down 20% quarter over quarter, which is great. I'm curious if you're finding that buying is getting back to business, back into a more normal, steady state.
I would agree with that. We definitely saw groups saying, you know, now is not the right time for us. Let's talk in a couple months. We're still interested in you, but we've just had to lay off 400 people. Yeah. But I think as a value prop as to what WellRight offers, like I mentioned, we're health and wellness, and we keep employee health, mental health, all those things very front of mind. So I think when we, you know, we're trying to present our value add to people, they started to realize that, yeah, maybe this is something I definitely need to invest in for my employees now more than ever. So we have started to see that come around in Q3. I would say groups moving closer to finalist discussions faster than we've seen before. Typically it's like a 6 to 9 month sales cycle for us, and we've seen that actually shorten up a little bit. So I would say we've actually started to see that turn around in the beginning of Q3. So
have you had, on the enablement side, have you had to enable your team differently in this buying environment?
Absolutely. We've had to get a little bit more creative as to, you're not bringing people into the office for a week anymore to do meet and greets and learn different things, rules of the road, role playing is a little different now. But I think people learn differently anyways. And so something when I even joined the organization was doing some sort of an onboarding for our sales readiness and meeting different ways. Like our sales team has always been remote. They didn't always all live in Chicago. They live in their territories. So having different modalities for training has been important, whether it's a video or the playbook, you know, a practical application, role playing. So I think some of those principles have always been there, but we're definitely relying on them a lot more in the absence of not meeting face to face and cheering together in a bar, you know, for lunch or whatever.
It's amazing. We had a new CSM start with us last week, and he commented on Slack about the onboarding, and that it was one of the best he had seen, but mostly because of the ability to watch the videos, the ability to just fill the time in a more asynchronous way of hearing and learning and seeing what others are doing. And that's encouraging. Those are those little signs. You're like, all right, we're doing something right here.
Yes.
Totally. One of the other, on a trickier area, is when we looked at the sales teams, what we're finding today is that in the spirit of doing more with less, we are finding that there's two groups. There's teams that did have difficult decisions to make. They went through RIFs, and there's teams that were fortunate to be able to get through that without making that. I think both of us were on the fortunate side where we've maintained our teams and invested on that. One of the areas that the data was showing is that where teams have had to make a RIF, though the number of meetings per rep is up, when we look at burnout before, there's a concern here that we really are asking individuals to do much more and potentially pushing the limits.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing even in August that it's starting to, it's hitting its limits. It's coming back down. It's starting to get closer to the median of the teams that haven't had those significant changes.
Right.
Thoughts as you think about, Q3 right now and what September and October sort of hold as we enter even Q4. What are your thoughts on kind of, the mentality of sales teams today?
So I think I shared with you previously in a discussion that we did not have RIFs, but we definitely went on a hiring freeze. And
Yeah.
I have a couple different open spots on my team right now that I'm hoping look to fill in the beginning of the new year. But my SDR team definitely felt this impact. They were having to do more, support more outside reps. Truth be told, they were getting a lot of meetings, great. But again, like you said, that burnout piece. So as an empathetic leader, I was, telling them, we have unlimited PTO, take some time off. Put yourself first. You have kids at home, or you want to go to the lake house with your family this week. I totally get it. The doing more with less, I think, you definitely can get tapped out pretty easily. And while we want to continue that trajectory in sales of, yes, we're getting the ball rolling, and your people are just as important as well. You don't want people, I think, quitting on you. I don't think people would do that in these times, hopefully. But also, you want to be an empathetic leader during these times to say, all right, it's been a really challenging year, couple of months. So, you've really kicked some butt these last few months to take a day or two off, have an extended weekend, enjoy your family, go take a nap, whatever.
No, it's impressive. I think that the sustainability is the piece where you see that little uplift that companies are having, but it's not sustainable. And as the world opens back up and as companies get going, that's where attrition usually will catch up with those that were in unsustainable environments. And many of us, by the way, are having to operate in ways that are uncharted. So no judgment, just it's a tricky time and people are making decisions, but how do we encourage teams to get time away, to stay, healthy?
Tough. I mean, I think people almost feel like a little guilty if they do take time off because they're already working from home. And it's like, we get that you're working from home, but you're working like mad, and we understand that. So
I was curious on just the physical side of health. We talk a lot about mental health. Mm-hmm. We're all sitting a ton. I know I can feel it more than ever. It's just interesting to see how this is impacting all of us. What can we be doing to help encourage our teams? And do you think this is something we as companies should be doing, is promoting the physical well-being, the self-care side of things? Absolutely.
I think Zoom meetings are great. Putting a face to the name is great. But if you're having internal meetings, I hate to say the regular old conference call way, but maybe having a walking meeting together so that you're actually moving. Taking those breaks to make sure that you're stretching, the ergonomics, make sure you're sitting in a comfortable chair. Some of those very simple things, because sitting all day is not healthy. Sitting is the new smoking, they say. So you don't want to be doing that all day long.
I love it. I think I might be converting my leadership meeting next week. The last data point that I wanted to get your perspective on, Stephanie, and on a real positive, we are seeing that the teams are coming together, that sellers are bringing more sellers in, and that there's a 13% increase in sellers joining meetings since January. Are you finding that the teams are leaning on each other more today while they're remote?
Absolutely. I think our team has been more collaborative now than ever in terms of, do you know this broker working on this deal? Great, I'm going to bring you in on this call. Or, hey, this group was actually a former client of mine when I worked over here. I'm going to give you some tidbits offline. Or, this is the competitor that they're against. I know a lot about them. We've been doing that more and more in our weekly sales meetings. Within chat, like we have a chat function. We don't use Slack, but we have a chat function that we use internally. And I would say it's really, really, it makes my heart happy to see so much collaboration, because inherently I think salespeople are so competitive, right? That sometimes I always think of Schmeagol with Lord of the Rings with like my precious, like this is my information, I'm not going to share it. But actually we've gotten quite the opposite. There's a lot more collaboration and transparency and teamwork happening, which I think we all have one goal: to really make our company successful. And so we've seen that come to life.
It's incredible. It's I'm so excited to see how all this comes together, in the months ahead of, maintaining the collaboration, yet getting the human connectivity back. It's just a very interesting time. Stephanie, thanks so much. We appreciate you joining us. The data, for those listening, you can go to Chorus.ai and access the recordings and download the data that we showed. And Stephanie, wish you a great rest of the Thursday.
Thank you. Same to you.